Two mysterious twin girls invite a lone cowboy home, but what happens next will leave you speechless. A simple act of kindness turns into an unexpected, life-changing proposal he never saw coming. Will he accept this shocking offer or walk away forever? Watch till the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. The wind swept across the vast plains of the American frontier, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and distant rain. Ethan rode slowly, his horse's steady rhythm echoing the quiet solitude he had grown used to. The sky burned orange as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. He had been traveling for days without a clear destination, guided only by instinct and the need to keep moving. Silence had become his closest companion, and he preferred it that way. People often brought complications, and Ethan had left those behind long ago, or at least tried to. His eyes remained sharp, scanning the horizon out of habit. Life on the frontier demanded awareness, and Ethan had learned that lesson the hard way. Every sound mattered. Every movement could mean danger or opportunity. As he approached a narrow wooded trail, something unusual caught his attention. Two small figures struggled near a pile of fallen branches. Slowing his horse, Ethan observed them carefully before approaching. As he got closer, he realized they were young twin girls, no older than 10, trying to carry firewood that was clearly too heavy for them. Without saying much, Ethan dismounted and walked toward them. The girls looked up, their expressions shifting from caution to curiosity. There was something striking about them, their matching features, their calm yet confident gaze. Their clothing and appearance suggested they belonged to a nearby Apache community. Ethan gave a slight nod and quietly began lifting the heavier pieces of wood, stacking them with ease. The girls watched him closely at first, as if measuring his intentions, but soon their guarded expressions softened into genuine smiles. "Thank you," one of them said, her voice steady despite her young age. The other quickly added that they had been trying for hours. Ethan simply shrugged, brushing dust from his hands. He wasn't used to conversation, especially with children, but there was something about their presence that felt different. They didn't seem afraid of him. Instead, they seemed almost certain he would help. That confidence caught his attention. It wasn't common on the frontier, especially among children who often learned caution early. Once the wood was gathered, the girls exchanged a quick glance before turning back to him. They insisted he come with them to their home, explaining that their mother would want to thank him properly. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who accepted invitations easily. Experience had taught him that. Getting involved in other people's lives often led to trouble, but the sincerity in their voices, combined with a quiet sense of curiosity, made him pause longer than usual. After a moment, Ethan gave a small nod, agreeing to follow them. He led his horse slowly as the girls guided him through the narrow trail. The path twisted between tall trees, their branches forming a loose canopy overhead. The fading sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating shifting patterns on the ground. As they walked, the girls began whispering to each other, their voices low but filled with excitement. Every now and then, they glanced back at Ethan, their expressions almost playful, as if they were sharing a secret he wasn't meant to hear. Ethan noticed their behavior but chose not to question it. Children often had their own way of communicating, and he assumed it was nothing more than harmless chatter. Still, there was something unusual in their tone, something deliberate. He had spent enough time reading people to recognize when words carried hidden meaning. Yet instead of pressing them for answers, he remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. It had been a long time since he felt even a hint of curiosity about where a path might lead. As the trail stretched on, Ethan found himself reflecting on how unexpected this encounter had been. Just hours ago, he'd been riding alone with no intention of stopping anywhere. Now, he was following two strangers into unfamiliar territory. It wasn't like him, yet there was no sense of danger in the air, only a quiet anticipation he couldn't fully explain. The girls walked ahead with confidence, as if they knew exactly what they were doing and where this journey would end. What Ethan didn't realize was that this meeting was far from random. The twins weren't simply grateful for his help. They had already formed an idea, a bold plan shaped by their own understanding of family and survival. To them, Ethan wasn't just a passing traveler. He was a solution, an answer to something unspoken waiting at home. As they continued down the path, their whispered conversations carried a quiet excitement. And while Ethan remained unaware, every step he took was bringing him closer to a decision that could change his life forever. As Ethan stepped into the modest Apache homestead, the warmth of the fire contrasted sharply with the cold air outside. The structure was simple, yet carefully kept, reflecting a life built on resilience and quiet discipline. A woman stood near the fire, her posture calm and composed. This was Elena, the twins' mother. Her presence carried a quiet authority shaped by years of hardship. When her eyes met Ethan's, there was no fear or hesitation, only a steady acknowledgement. She greeted him with measured kindness, offering thanks for helping her daughters and inviting him to sit, and Ethan removed his hat and nodded respectfully before taking a seat near the fire. The crackling flames cast a soft glow across the room, creating an atmosphere that felt both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Elena moved with quiet efficiency, preparing a simple meal. There was no unnecessary conversation, yet the silence didn't feel awkward. Instead, it carried a sense of mutual understanding. Ethan had spent years avoiding places like this, places where people looked at you not as a stranger, but as someone who could belong, even if only for a moment. The twins, however, brought a different energy into the room. They sat close together, their excitement barely contained. As Elena served the meal, the girls began talking, at first softly, then with growing enthusiasm. They described how Ethan had helped them without hesitation, lifting the heavy wood as if it were nothing. Their words painted him as something more than he believed himself to be. Ethan shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the attention. He wasn't used to being praised, especially not in such an open and sincere way. Elena listened quietly as her daughters spoke, her expression thoughtful. She occasionally glanced at Ethan as if trying to understand the man behind their words. There was no interruption, no attempt to silence the girls. Instead, she allowed them to speak freely, knowing their voices carried more than simple gratitude. Ethan noticed this, sensing that the conversation was moving towards something deeper. The warmth of the fire now felt heavier, filled with an unspoken tension that he couldn't quite define. As the meal came to an end, the room grew quieter. The twins exchanged a brief look, the same knowing glance Ethan had noticed earlier on the trail. This time, however, there was no whispering. One of them spoke first, her voice calm but firm. She explained that their family had been incomplete since their father's passing. The other continued, saying they had been waiting for someone who could bring strength and protection back into their home. Their words were simple, but their meaning was clear. Ethan's expression shifted as realization began to settle in. Before he could respond, the girls made their intention unmistakable. They wanted him to stay, not just as a guest, but as part of their family. More specifically, they wanted him to become their mother's partner. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Ethan felt a sudden stillness take over the room. His mind struggled to process what he had just heard, caught between disbelief and confusion. He glanced toward Elena, expecting her to dismiss the idea or correct her daughters. Instead, she remained silent, her gaze steady yet gentle. There was no sign of pressure in her expression, no demand or expectation. What he saw instead was something far more complex, a quiet hope, carefully held beneath years of strength and independence. It wasn't a plea, but it also wasn't indifference. It was the look of someone who had learned to survive alone, yet still understood the value of companionship. Ethan leaned back slightly, exhaling as he tried to gather his thoughts. This was not the kind of situation he had prepared for. He had spent years moving from place to place, avoiding attachments and responsibilities. The idea of suddenly becoming part of a family felt overwhelming. Yet, as he sat there, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the quiet sincerity of the people before him, something inside him shifted. This wasn't a trap or an obligation, it was an opportunity. For the first time in a long while, Ethan allowed himself to consider a different kind of future. The life he had been living was one of constant movement, never staying long enough to build anything meaningful. But here, in this small homestead, he saw something he hadn't realized he was missing, a sense of stability, of connection, of purpose. The twins watched him closely, their expressions hopeful but patient, as if they already believed in his answer. Ethan looked down at his hands, worn from years of travel and hard work. Then he lifted his gaze back to Elena. The silence between them spoke louder than words. In that moment, he understood that this decision wasn't just about them. It was also about himself. It was about whether he was willing to leave behind the life he knew for something uncertain, yet potentially far more meaningful. And as the fire continued to burn softly beside them, Ethan realized this wasn't just an invitation. It was a turning point he could no longer ignore.